Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar with Dennis Miller. We are going to be getting started at this time. I wanted to just welcome you all. Today is April 10th, and Dennis will be discussing building strong board chair and nonprofit CEO relationships. Just like to remind everyone that the slides will be provided to you after the webinar, and we are also going to be able to take your questions through chat. So throughout the webinar, go ahead and submit those questions, and we'll be sure to get them to Dennis at the conclusion. At this time, I'd like to turn things over to Dennis Miller.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today's webinar. As a nonprofit leadership coach for almost 30 years, I've worked with hundreds of organizations around the country, and I mostly am focusing on board governance, leadership development, strategic planning, and philanthropy. Let's move on here. Today's agenda is going to cover sort of four major things. What are the key elements? There's 5 of them to building a successful board chair and CEO relationship. What are the top 10 signs of a troubled relationship and how to try to address that? What are the key roles that each needs to play and how they are different? And how should one measure and assess the performance of the chair and CEO? Next. The board chair and the CEO partnership is obviously crucial. The leadership partnership between the chair and the CEO is critical to the success of the board and the organization, and it's important to nurture that relationship from the beginning of the chair's tenure. Let me start by saying the word board chair and board president are synonymous, as well as CEO and executive director are synonymous. So the purpose of the webinar, I'm using chair and CEO. Also, in terms of board of directors or board of trustees, I'm using board of trustees. The chair should sit down with the chief executive early on to discuss their work styles, how they like to communicate, and what they view as their strengths and weaknesses. Creating the strategic vision. It's crucial for both individuals to be on the same page and have a consensus on achieving that vision, one focusing on the organization's needs and one focusing on the board's needs. We're going to talk about the importance of building consensus, particularly the role of the board chair in building consensus, how crucial that is. Also want to mention here, obviously, one of the big differences between a nonprofit CEO and a for-profit CEO, as many of you do know, is that in the for-profit world, the chairman and CEO are the same position, same person. Obviously, in the nonprofit world that we're all operating in, there's 2 different roles. There's one of the chair and there's one of the CEO. Let's move on. Let's begin with some of the 5 key elements to building a successful chair and CEO relationship. Some of this comes from my 30 years of being both a CEO and a board chair for many organizations here. Well, obviously, one of the first things is just the ability to be both passionate. It's really crucial that everybody have a shared passion for the organization to drive and spend the time they're going to have strategically to propel the board and the organization forward to sustain the mission. It's really important. The chair understands and wants a job. I mean, it seems like a simple thing to say, but oftentimes we'll talk about how the board chair is not as interested in having a job as sort of the last person standing their hands. It's really important that the board chair understands the job and that they want the job. He or she needs to be able to take the time to talk to board members, to help cultivate and solicit philanthropy, to steer committee chairs in the right direction, to recruit new board members, and to work with the CEO. So the chair must want that job. The third key element, obviously, is the need to plan a board agenda and meetings together. I can't say this enough. It's really crucial that at least the board chair and the CEO have a pre-meeting at least a week or more before the board meeting to help develop the agenda for the meeting, and also to focus in on what specific goals or votes are needed at that meeting. What do you need to accomplish? So it's really important to have a pre-meeting to the larger meeting. It's really crucial. You can do it over a breakfast meeting. You can do it over a lunch meeting, but it's really important. And you may want to bring in your vice chair of the board as well. And you may, if you're a large organization, may want to bring in your general counsel. But for the most part, it's really important to have a board leadership and sort of a pre-agenda meeting here. Obviously, it goes without saying that both the key elements is that each one has strategic goals, and that the board needs to know what the CEO needs to do, and the CEO needs to know what the board needs to do, so how to best engage them. It's also really important that both of them kind of get to know each other personally and professionally. I mean, supporting and nurturing the CEO is one of the main responsibilities of the board chair. Begin to develop mutual trust and keep the lines of communication open so the CEO will feel comfortable sharing problems both professionally and personally. Personal concerns, as we all know, can get in the way of job performance. Whether they be financial or marital troubles can affect the performance as much as trouble with staff. It's up to the chair to initiate and nurture that open and confidential relationship. I must reiterate again, it's a confidential relationship. The chair and the CEO also need to spend some time brainstorming together about the trends and opportunities for the organization's future. The chair should not try to let more than 2 weeks go by without ever calling the CEO. I think it's important to have scheduled at least every 2 weeks a meeting with each other. It could be a phone call, and just to say sometimes how things are going here. You want to also make clear to the CEO via the board chair that you want to be kept of any problems that as they occur. You want to reassure him or her that the board can handle bad news. There's nothing worse than having a board read about a bad situation in a newspaper the next day and not being told about it. Obviously, the board is accountable for what the organization does and does not do. Therefore, they need to be kept informed. It's very important. Open communication between the two can prevent a small problem from turning into public embarrassment. Similarly, the CEO should not be surprised by any disgruntlement, anger, or politics on the board. The chair owes it to the CEO to keep him or her informed of how board members feel about certain issues. If the board is in disarray or if a difficult member is stirring things up, let the CEO know while he or she has a fighting chance to do something about it. It is critical from both of us, both the chair and the CEO, from day one to think about future leadership. Let's move on. The 10 top signs of a troubled relationship. The first one is obviously that the CEO or the chair doesn't want the job, and that can be a very difficult thing. Sometimes, and we're going to cover a little bit later here in the webinar about some organizations, the difficulty they have in getting a board chair and how to address that. But obviously, it's from the beginning, if the board chair was perhaps the one voted in when they didn't attend the meeting, it's really a beginning of a difficult situation. The next sign is when too often CEOs want to keep their board chair at arm's length. A recent situation, obviously, when a CEO was terminating their head of human resources, who had been reporting directly to her, and the board chair didn't even know about it and put him in a difficult situation when a lawsuit arose. And so it's important that obviously you keep each other informed here. I can't overestimate that one of the ways of looking at not having a troubled relationship is to think about such as a partnership. The number 3 top sign of a troubled relationship, which I've seen, which particularly sometimes when the board chair has been recently retired, is what I could call, where's my office? And you dread the idea that the board chair is looking for an office in your organization here. It's sometimes you can have a situation where the board chair will intrude too much. They want to micromanage. They have this old standard of thinking that they're the boss and you're the employee relationship, and they have a tendency to want to micromanage you, but that's not the relationship you need there, and you need to make sure that gets addressed here. In some cases, the board chair actually wants a CEO job, which makes it very difficult. And sometimes there's little that the CEO can do about that other than getting support from other people here. Again, before, trust and respect were never established. One of the things interesting about a board chair-CEO relationship is that it's probably the only comparison I can make is like an arranged marriage. Oftentimes, the CEO is not involved in picking the chair, and the chair is not involved in picking the CEO. Neither one are picking each other. So it is really important that they get to know each other as quickly as they can and establish some type of rapport. It's just really difficult sometimes. And what a lot of people don't realize what CEOs go through is that every 2 years, or whether it's a year or however long the term of the chair is, they're facing a new boss. And that can be a very difficult situation where you're just beginning to get to know one person well, kind of what makes them tick. You have a good communication style with each other, and then he or she, as board chair, his term is up, and a new person is establishing. And I know from firsthand experience that can be a really anxiety-producing situation when you realize every year or two you're getting a new boss. It's one of the reasons I never recommend a board chair term of just 1 year. So if members of the board that are on the call today, please be respectful that your CEO has a new boss every year or two. One of the signs of a troubled relationship, again, is both sometimes the CEO wants to protect the chair, and that's not a really, wants to protect the chair from so-called a sort of a bad board, that's sort of the term, and that's not the role either, and nor is it the role of the chair to protect the CEO from the board. And so it's not an issue of protecting each other. Again, I can't overemphasize the issue of partnership. Another big sign of a troubled relationship is that the chair is just not accessible. When the CEO needs them, you have to have a way, whether it's nowadays through technology, of a text message or an email or a voice message or a call to his home, their office or their home. It's really important that if you are the board chair, to let your CEO know where you will be this week, not every day, but where you'll be in case there's an emergency, how to get a hold of him or for her. Another big sign of a troubled relationship, obviously, is the whole issue of just no regular communication in either direction. Again, can't overemphasize how important it is early on in the relationship to figure out how does your board chair want you to communicate if you're a CEO. Some people just, give me a call on the big issues, give me a call on every other Friday or set up a breakfast, but it's really important that you have an ongoing communication discussion here. Last but not least, it's sort of like neither the board chair or CEO is getting involved in setting the agenda together, and then people show up and they thought, geez, I thought you were running the meeting, and there's no preparation for it. So all those are clearly signs of a troubled relationship. Oftentimes, one can address that by, if you are the CEO and that you have a difficulty with your chair, find someone on the board. It could be the vice chair of the board or someone else on the board that you feel you have a good relationship with, and that they may have a relationship with the chair, and help them sort of intercede and create a conversation with the chair. And maybe it's sometimes you as CEO just needs to arrange for a meeting with the chair to let them know what your needs are in terms of communication and things like that. It's sometimes they just assume they know what they don't know. And so it's really important that communication gets done as early as very possible here. Let's move on. One of the challenges that in terms of having a good, strong relationship with a board chair and CEO is too often the case it's difficult to find someone that wants to be the chair. I don't know how many of you involved in the webinar today had the situation, but it's far too common than is necessary. So let's talk about some of the ways that both you as a board member or board chair and a CEO can help address that. Clearly, one of the things that is important to do early on, particularly for new board chairs, is to assess the leadership talent of current board members. I can't overemphasize that, how important that situation really is. Once the new board chair has accepted the job, he or she should spend time getting to know the organization and taking stock of its financial health, how effective it is, and what its potential is. No matter how familiar a new board chair has been with the organization, even if it's been on the board for years, the role of chair puts him or her in a new vantage point. They should also take a critical look at how the board operates. The new board chair should look at the strengths and weaknesses of each member of the board and the board as a whole. A good board chair should include at least one member with some kind of a good board should include at least one member with various expertises in the area, perhaps with other specialized skill sets. The board chair should take a look at what that skill set is. The chair should also be well advised to look at the committee structure early on. So assessing leadership talent of current board members of whose potential to be a chair is crucial. Also, it's really important that when both the board and chair or CEO are involved in board recruitment, that you factor in the issue or identify issue of leadership capabilities. Far too often, the issue of potential leadership on the board isn't even addressed when they're recruiting people, and that becomes a problem here. I also do recommend that the chair, once appointed in their first year, not only begin to identify potential candidates to replace him or her. I do not believe that just because you are in the vice chair role that you automatically should assume to become chair. I've seen too often times someone be a very effective vice chair and finds out at the time they get to be a chair they are not really effective here. I don't like the idea that people assume that, sort of move up the chairs from secretary to treasurer to vice chair or vice president to president. I think it's important that people need to earn that respect and earn that appointment. So it's really important for the chair to work closely with the CEO in identifying potential candidates in year 1 year. One of the ways also to help deal with the difficulty of sometimes replacing a board chair is for the CEO to initiate some ongoing training for all board members. Could be a workshop, bring someone into the organization, do a workshop on some type of governance matter or a strategic session of trends, or to have one or so members of the board go to various conferences. Another aspect of helping with that issue of board chair is to have potential, once you identified someone as sort of a chair-elect, to assign a mentor from the board, someone who has experience in leadership who may want to be their board coach, or a former board chair as a board coach, or bring in a professional board coach. One of the reasons why a lot of people don't want to be the board chair is because they just feel it's so much work, and they see really that the board work is very inefficient, and they feel like, I just don't have the time to deal with that. So the best thing that one can do, and the CEO can do, and the board chair can do, to make sure there are candidates wanting to be the board chair, is to make sure the work of the board is efficient. And one of the ways of making sure the work of the board is efficient is setting up a very effective committee structure. A really good board, the work of the board is done at the committee level and then discussed and any action taken at the full board meeting, but it should not, all the work of the entire board should not be taking place at the full board meetings. They go on for too long, and then people are sort of reluctant to become chair. It's also very important for both the chair and the CEO to find ways of rewarding and recognize board members, whether they've done an individual achievement or accomplishment, whether in their public life or in commercial life or business life or on the board of what they've done, they volunteered. It's really important to recognize people. People like it. We all like to be rewarded and recognized. Again, providing opportunities for professional development. It means someone who's a potential board leader, have them go to a conference on boards or governance or leadership. I think you also want to highlight the culture of success. People want to be part of a winning organization, and I think it's really important to create a situation that people would want to strive to be the leader on the board and not to sort of be pulled in at last resort here. And obviously, to recognize former board chairs. I, as a former CEO, what I actually did create was I created a board chair council, and we actually would have a dinner annually with spouses, significant others, and keep in touch and keep them communicated and get newsletters and everything, but find a way of keeping board chairs involved. And last but not least, when you're having issues about selecting a board chair, don't wait until your board chair tells you he or she is stepping down and doesn't want to be the chair anymore. This should be an ongoing process. So I hope that helps you in selecting a board chair and getting rid of the idea of that it always has to be a struggle. Let's move on and talk about building strong board relationships. What's the role of the board chair? Well, again, it is a partnership, but the one thing I put here was I don't want to have to just run meetings. I recently had a board chair that I coached, and he literally said to me, I thought my job was just to run the meetings, and obviously that is just a small part of the meetings here. It is really, really important that the role of the board chair, which has many functions here, is to help engage and strategically align the board. The common feature or the common issue that I have found in my career as a leadership coach with boards is the lack of engagement. And that means sometimes that I've seen board meetings very recently where the entire board meeting is about giving updated reports on finance, development, buildings, facilities, clinical quality control. It's sort of going around the room sharing reports, updates, and not one person on the board is asked to be engaged in a conversation. It's crucial that the board chair gets to know individual board members, their talents and their interests, and finds a way to engage them and ask them questions about how do they feel, how do they think about that, what's their thoughts, what are their suggestions. It is also crucial in building a strong board chair and CEO relationship for the board chair to help strategically align the board. What does that mean? Well, the concept of strategic alignment, which I created, which is more than the time allowed for this discussion here, is to make sure that the committees of the board and the work of the committee and the work of the board itself is aligned towards achieving the organization's vision and make sure that vision is measured here. Obviously, a big role is to support and coach the CEO. But also, it's just supporting the CEO doesn't mean being a yes person. It's really important to give the CEO feedback. A big component of being the board chair, which is often overlooked, is the need for the person to build consensus behind the scenes. Give you an example. So if you are changing, a major change is taking place within your organization, you are contemplating, I'm not saying a name change, you're contemplating an affiliation or a collaboration or a merger, or any issue that may be a change to your organization, or a new program, or a new leader, or anything. The board chair doesn't just show up at the board meetings. He or she needs to make sure that he has talked to people. So in essence, like, you don't want to go into a board meeting asking for votes without knowing the votes you have. And he, as the board chair, should be the one behind the scenes helping get those votes here. Also, the role of the board chair is evaluate the committee structure. Too often, committee structures just have a tendency to meet because it's been in the bylaws for so long to meet, and yet the committees are weak and there's no specific goal that the committee has. It's important to evaluate the committee structure, and oftentimes you may need a new committee to focus on some of the strategic stuff you're doing to what you have here. It is also the role of the board chair to appoint committee chairs. I mean this again strongly. The role of the board chair is to appoint committee chairs. It's not up to the approval of the board to do that. The board chair may want to do it in collaboration, discussion with them, but the board chair, he or she, has full authority and should have full authority to appoint who they'd like to have as committee chairs. Again, the role of the board chair is to be regularly communicating with members of the board. Another key aspect of this is the CEO evaluation with board input. I've seen too many times when there is no CEO evaluation for one, or if there's been CEO evaluation, it's really the board chair and maybe the executive committee at best chair. The board, a good board chair, a strong board chair, is one that makes sure there's input from all board members in some evaluation tool to provide feedback to the CEO on how well they are doing here. Clearly, the role of the chair is to help recruit and orient new membership. It's to play a role in educating the board or making sure that educational programs are there. It's also obviously to recognize the work and achievements of board members as part of cultivating and soliciting gifts. But more importantly, the role of the board chair is to help focus in on the future. One of the things that I recommend to my clients is this: board meetings should be spent at least 50% or more of their time and talking about tomorrow and talking about what do we need to do to achieve our strategic vision. If your board is spending more than 50% of your time talking about what happened yesterday in reports here, you're going to disengage your board members. And so it's really important that the board chair of everybody has a focus in on tomorrow. You do want to hear what the reports are going on, but it's more important for that board chair to engage in discussion about what's going to happen tomorrow here. And obviously the role of the board chair is to measure the level of engagement and motivation, and we're going to talk about that near the end of the webinar and how to do that here. But I always tell people this: good boards evaluate the CEO, great boards evaluate themselves. So this is what the role of the board chair needs to do to help build a strong CEO relationship. Let's move on. Well, goes without saying that many of the same things can be said for the chair here, but certainly the role of the CEO is to bring a high level of passion to the organization and a high level of inspiration here. It is just really, really crucial that one does that here. I believe that the role of the CEO today, which is very different from what it was, the role today of the CEO is to create the vision for the organization. You do it in conjunction with your board, but in the old days, the board set the vision and asked the executive director to implement it. I believe today it's reversed. Boards are looking for people to be leaders. They are not looking for people so they ask them, what do I do today, what do I do tomorrow? The CEO today is someone that helps create the vision, and people who gets inspired by the vision and creates the reason for the vision and how we're going to measure the vision. So the role of the CEO is dramatically different here. Again, a role of the CEO is to engage all stakeholders. Staff is crucial, as well as external stakeholders, people in the community leaders, elected and appointed officials. Today, more than ever before, the role of the CEO is moving away from being the inside manager of programs and grants to being an outside CEO, engaging relationships with people inside and outside. It's really crucial that this role of CEO dramatically changes here. I want to talk a second here about when I mentioned about increasing the stock price. Now, I often will ask organizations and clients about the idea of what your stock price is here, and people tell me, well, we don't have a stock price, and I understand that technically here, but I'd say this: a good CEO today is focusing on raising the value of that organization in the eyes of everyone. That's what I mean by stock price. And so the idea, how do you increase the stock price of an organization? Well, obviously, it's affected by a lot of areas. The more you can promote and focus in on achievements, it increases your stock price. The more you can communicate your strategies, the more you can communicate the success of the organization, the better the stock price. When you have a friend or fundraising activities, when you have a really nice gala or a golf outing, it can increase your stock price. It can also decrease it. If you have a golf outing and people go to the register that morning at the golf club and their name's on a list and there's no one there to tell them where to go in the locker room or how to get dressed or where's the dinner or where to get a drink, little things like that, people say, geez, what a mess. One of the really crucial things for the role of the CEO today is help a board member and help the board become a high-impact governance board. We've had conferences, and we're going to have a webinar next month about the role of the governance committee, but a board member today wants to make sure that their board is strong and has impactful governance here. Whereas in the past, the executive director or role of CEO may have been more mission-driven, today it's more strategic-driven. Thinking about the relationships one can be having, thinking about the collaboration be having, thinking about what they need to do to move the organization forward here. So a strategic thinker is something that's really, really important. Though you can say this for everybody, today an emotionally intelligent person, an emotionally intelligent CEO is more important in my eyes than someone with a high IQ. What is emotional intelligence? It just refers to the ability to perceive, control, and evaluate emotions. I think it's really important people to be able to read body language and understand where people, where people are at emotionally, and we are emotional beings, and one wants to be cognizant and be empathetic to the emotions of other people. Members of your board, members of your team, members of your staff, donors, we're all human beings. It's important to be able to understand where they are with that. It's also obviously a major role for the CEO to build trust, respect, and credibility. And that certainly goes without saying here, but a little bit of some advice on that. We do not earn trust and respect because of our formal authority. You can walk around your organization, tell people, I'm the boss, CEO. That's not going to demand respect. It's certainly not going to demand respect. Respect is really gained through your informal authority. It's people's admiration when they trust you. You win their hearts by your sincerity, by your passion, by your vision here. it's really important in terms of building up credibility, because that is done when you are consistently making decisions that align with the organization's mission and values. Employees know real quickly when you are making a decision that is in your self-interest. And so the more you are providing a leadership role of moving your organization forward, respecting every individual who's on your team, you will build trust and respect and credibility, but it does not come from just being your formal position, but from your informal position. Also, obviously, the role of the CEO is a decision maker. There is nothing worse for working with someone or a board member looking at a CEO when they feel they just cannot make a decision and they drag something on, or they can't deal with non-performance, or they can't deal with the tough issues about having to perhaps not just counsel someone, but to remove someone from the organization. Everyone needs to know that someone's in charge. Certainly the role of a CEO is mentor and coach. Mentor and coach to your fellow colleagues, and mentor and coach to your staff, and even mentor and coach to your board. And many times the CEO has come from within the organization, as I did, became president. So now you're where you were once peers, now you're the boss, and that takes a special relationship to kind of work through that here. The last two actually key roles of the CEO today, I think is, it goes without saying, but I want to focus on it a little bit, it's business-minded. The saying I use quite a bit, which is that nonprofit is your tax status, not your business plan. Today, the role of the CEO is dramatically different here. And so one needs to know how they're going to be increasing revenues, how they're going to be building revenues, how they're going to be increasing philanthropy. You need to grow your way to success. You can never cut your way to success. So it's really important to understand that, yes, you are a nonprofit organization, and nonprofits are not providing taxes, but you need additional revenue over expenses in order to invest in equipment, to invest in buildings, and invest pouring it back into the operations for the organization. Last but not least, obviously, a good CEO, as along with the board chair, focus on leadership succession. Not only who you can help develop and maybe replacing you someday, but it's really important, as we indicated before, both for the CEO and the board chair to focus on board and leadership succession. But you always want to focus in on who might be replacing me someday. How do I mentor them? How do I nurture them? So that's an important role here, and that should be discussed with your chair. Let's move on. So how does one, if you are a board chair or a member of the board here, how do you go about evaluating your CEO? Well, a couple of things here. It's important to ask first for your CEO to develop goals both for the organization and for themselves for the upcoming fiscal year or upcoming calendar year. Those goals should be shared with the board and shared with the board chair, and the board should build consensus in an executive session on what those goals should be both for the organization and for the CEO, and those goals are the ones one should be measuring their performance. Goals can be both quantitative, like operating margin or revenue or philanthropy, and certainly can be qualitative in terms of image of the organization, the community, and overall perception of the organization. It is really, really important, again, for everybody on the board to have some input into the performance upon those agreed goals. A more current evaluation process is not only for the CEO to have an evaluation by his or her board, but his or her colleagues, the people that he or she supervises, or even potentially people that are key donors. But a good CEO and a good board chair makes sure that it's feedback on both sides of the house here. You can be a person who does a great job relating to your board, but may not be doing a great job in providing leadership with direction and support to those underneath you, and it's important for the board to have a better picture for that. Obviously, I think it's important, right before the evaluation is performed, is to ask for a self-evaluation. A lot of people have a tendency to be harder on themselves than other people are. It's important for a board chair or a board member to want a self-evaluation of the CEO to see how they feel about their own performance here. And obviously, not only do you want to review your past year evaluation, and when you do an evaluation, look at past year's goals, And that is the time when you're doing the evaluation to also establish the goals for next year we talked about here. So I believe that the entire board should have input into the CEO's performance as well as of getting feedback from his or her own direct staff here. Let's move on here a little bit. How do you measure board chair performance? Well, I measure board chair performance by incorporating it into an overall board performance assessment. Now, there are three ways, or at least two major ways, of people doing board evaluations. The number one, which is sort of the common way, is the use of a questionnaire. Oftentimes, they're filled out with a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. If you've never done any form of evaluation, it's a good first start. The downside of a questionnaire is that you never really have a chance to ask the open-ended questions. How do you feel about his or her leadership as a board chair? How do you feel about his or her leadership as a CEO? If you had a magic wand, what things would you change? How would you measure your own engagement and level of the board? Do you like being on the board? I think there's a questionnaire is a good tool to use. It's frequently used, but I think it has limitations to it. And so, but I do think as part of a board performance assessment should be the assessment of the board chair itself. Does he or she communicate well? Are they building consensus? Are they respected? Okay. Obviously, a key tool as a board assessment tool is to engage someone who's an expert in board performances or a facilitator and actually not only reviewing information about goals for the board or the CEO, but obviously has a conversation with each one of the people on the board about what they feel their strengths of the organization is or the board is and how they're doing it. And people have a tendency, oftentimes, if it's an experienced facilitator, to open up here. The main focus of getting a board performance assessment is you want to measure the level of engagement and motivation of your board. I can't overemphasize that the board and CEO and the board and the leadership team need to work in partnership. You know, the old style was, you know, the board took on the role, besides the founding board, the board took on the role of fiduciary responsibility, which to this day is still very important legally. But it doesn't mean you're going to engage your board. Boards also took on the role of strategic role and business role. Everybody needed a business plan, a strategic plan, and those roles are important. But if you did real research on board level of engagement, you'll find that they're not has been fulfilling by themselves. And so I said before in terms of board meetings about asking people to be involved in the conversations, you want to engage the members by having a discussion about each specific thing that impacts their strategic plan. Most strategic plans, obviously with a strong vision, have goals that deal with programs and services, goals that deal with brand identity, goals that deal with infrastructure operations, goals that deals with the board of governance, and goals that deal with marketing and philanthropy. Each one of those items should be discussed, engaged with the board so you have an opinion. That's the role of the board chair. That is the way you get good feedback to your board chair as well as your CEO here. Let's move on. Well, the whole point of today's session, obviously, in today's webinar, is that it is the most important relationship in the organization. Now, clearly, you know, relationships matter. A CEO needs to understand that they're only going to be as successful as their staff is, that their senior team is, and people need to align with that, and how well the board does. But if you are a board member today or a CEO, this is a relationship that if this is a good, strong, supportive relationship, the odds of your organization being strong and achievable and successfully achieving your goals and vision is highlighted. It's crucial. So it takes a commitment to excellence, both for the board chair and the CEO, to be committed to making sure the organization sustains itself going forward. A big part of being a successful relationship is addressing the internal obstacles. I say this over and over again. I write about this. I speak about this. The number one reason why organizations fail, and particularly nonprofit organizations, is not because of the external environment. It's not because the economy is bad or there's lack of public funding, and those are all real issues. But the main reason why organizations fail is the inability to deal with their internal obstacles. And internal obstacles range from everything from a poor-performing board member, a poor-performing member of the leadership team, any host of issues, silo mentality, all kind of things. People not trained, internal obstacles are what. Obviously, respecting each other is crucial. Getting to know each other is crucial. You want to work together in building a leadership pipeline. I mean, I'd like to recommend to all of you that there should be at least 2 to 3 people at any point in time that you're thinking about as potential for board leadership. Again, don't do it the day the board chair says, I'm going to be stepping down in January and it's now Christmas Eve or some other holiday season here. It's important to constantly have a pipeline of future leaders here. You both need to engage the board, and you both need to strategically align the organization to achieve that vision. And so, again, building a strong board chair and CEO relationship is crucial for the organization here. Let's move on. I'm going to be taking some questions now from you. I think we have a couple, Maria, and we'll talk about maybe we'll go back and talk about the next webinar a little bit later on. So one of the questions that I believe was the issue of, I can't get my board to understand the need to help me in raising money. And that's a very challenging issue for most people. And so here's what I would say. Most people are very uncomfortable asking for money. No one is an actually good fundraiser. And we oftentimes assume that people should know how to raise money, even if they're a very successful corporate person. We all generally have a fear of fundraising because no one wants to get rejected. And too often, nonprofit organizations function in what I call the tin cup theory of raising money, where they're focusing in on almost like the beggar in front of the bus terminal with a cup and pencils, begging for what you need, sir. If you can get your board to move away from, we need money because our organization needs it, to talking about the needs of those you serve and how the success you're having with that, and that wanting to people to invest in your success, you move away from the tin cup theory to the investment theory. You get people away from the idea of feeling personal rejection to cultivating relationships and cultivating value for people to invest in your success. So it is a common feature for board members to be reluctant to it. It is also important for the CEO to play on this role. And today, unfortunately, too many CEOs have grown up in the business and system and are not comfortable either here, but you can't survive without a diversified revenue portfolio. So one of those big issues there is the ability to change their mindset and culture from a tin cup theory to an investment theory of fundraising. Maria, do we have, I think there was another question we had was my CEO, the board is considering or would like to see some more collaboration today, and my board or my CEO is reluctant to begin to share information about things here. I think for everybody today, it's important that we don't have to do it all alone. We have to remember why we're all in this business. We have a mission. We are a socially benefit organization. We are a mission-driven organization. We are here to serve the needs that either the government can't handle, doesn't want to handle, or the economic marketplace of free enterprise doesn't take care of because there's no market return on it. That's why we're in this business, to help people. And so it is really, really important today, as everybody is focused on how do we sustain our mission, how do we stay alive, how do we succeed, how do we keep our heads above water, is it is important to be talking about how do we collaborate with other organizations. And I think the board members on the webinar today, I think boards should set up a reward and recognition structure for the CEO to be rewarded for recognition. In the for-profit world, obviously, CEOs are rewarded by affiliations and mergers because they get a big, large payout. In the nonprofit world, there's no payout. But it's important to provide security to people at the same time, encourage collaboration. Maria, we'll take, if there's any other questions right now on the topic of building strong board chair relationships. If anybody has a particular issue that's come up, I'd be happy to handle it now. I also do want to let everybody know on the webinar, if you have a particular issue that you'd rather talk in person, if you email me at my email, which is dennis@denniscmiller.com, all lowercase. There's no C stands for Charles. Dennis at DennisCMiller.com. I'd be more than happy to spend a complimentary session with you on the phone to address your issue. If there are no other questions, I hope today's webinar on how to build strong board chair CEO relationships has been insightful and helpful to you as you go about building your strong relationships and building your organization. If you feel at any time that you'd like to have someone like myself who is a leadership coach come in and talk to you and your board chair or your board as a whole, I'd be more than happy to do so. And also, you see my reading that's available to you. The most recent book is the Power of Strategic Alignment, a guide to energizing your leadership. The Nonprofit Board Therapist is how to unlock your board's and organization's true potential, and a guide to achieving the heights, the 4 pillars of successful nonprofit leadership. And then is there anything else at this point in time, Maria, that anybody has there?
No, I did not see any additional questions come in for you, Dennis. I'll just remind everyone that since they're muted, if they wanted to go ahead and type one in at this time, they could go ahead and do so while we're reminding everybody about the next webinar coming up, which will be on May 15th at 9:30 in the morning Eastern Time. And the topic is going to be evaluating your board's committee structures and the importance of the governance committee. So all of you will, of course, be invited to participate in that webinar if the topic is of interest to you. And, of course, Dennis always recommends that if you have somebody, a board member or another colleague that would benefit, you can forward that email on to them as well once you get that email invite.
I also would like you to be aware of my website, www.DennisCMiller.com. There's DennisCMiller.com. There's a lot of free information. We have a newsletter that goes out on a periodic basis with Leadership Nuggets. There's a leadership blog. There are articles that I've written for the Nonprofit Times for free that is available on the blog. There are some video testimonials. All the webinars and YouTube are there on the website, I believe. So please feel free to access my website for your informational needs. And if there's no other questions, I would wish you all good well, and thank you very much for participating in today's webinar. I'll see you in May.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.